Hey there, everybody. PTPOP here, leading you out of the rabbit hole, one grain of truth at a time. And today I asked the question, did the Beatles get signed by EMI Capitol based on charisma alone? We're going to take a deep dive into that today, guys. It's going to be a fun show, very insightful. So hang in there. As most of you know, I have been a Beatles fan since I was the age of 8, and I'm now 60. So you do the math. I've been there a long time. I used to be a complete and total Beatlemaniac, just totally infatuated and obsessed with the Beatles when I was much younger. And I'm going to give a shout out to Mike Williams of Sage of Quay Radio, who woke me up to the possibilities that the Beatles may not be the band that we all thought they were. Okay? Now, neither of us, well, at least I don't. I can't speak for Mike. I think Mike knows more than he lets on. But I don't know for a fact what I'm about to talk about is the truth. It's speculation and purely for entertainment purposes only. Maybe to get you to think a little. But let's talk about this in depth here a little bit. Were the Beatles just cheeky lads from Liverpool with charm, or did they have songs to back it up? Okay. Now, why do I talk about this, okay? I'm going to play a video here from the Beatles producer, EMI producer, Abbey Road producer, Sir George Martin. And this is from an interview that Roseanne Barr did with him, I believe, back in the 80s or the 90s. I'm not certain what this is from. This is from the Beatle Cavern on TikTok. And this is George Martin talking about the first time he ever laid eyes on the Beatles and how they were presented to him.
In 1962, Brian Epstein walked into my office with a record of this group called the Beatles, which I thought...
Now, Brian Epstein, for those of you who don't know, was the Beatles' manager.
It was such a stupid name.
Let's listen to that again. So Brian Epstein walks into George Martin's office at EMI Abbey Road and says, here's this record by this group called the Beatles, and this is what he says.
A record of this group called the Beatles, which I thought was such a stupid name.
He thought the Beatles #1 was a stupid name. That's not good.
You know, so corny with an A.
Yeah, with an A.
So corny. Their name was stupid and corny. Not a good start.
And they weren't very good.
They weren't very good musicians. That's strike number 2.
Funny kind of sound. I thought, well, you know, if you want me to judge it on this, forget it.
So they didn't like their name. He didn't like their musicianship. He said, forget it. The boys are no good.
I said, but if you bring them down to the studios and I'll have a look at them, see what happens. I was very blasé about it.
Uh-huh.
And
so he brings them down to the studio. They walk in, the cheeky lads that they were.
They came in, and they came into the studios. And it was like electricity. You know, they had this wonderful atmosphere. They had tremendous charisma. They had no great songs with them. Doesn't come out and say it, but he's implying they don't have any good original songs. It's on record that he said he didn't like the original music. So he doesn't like their name. He doesn't like their sound. He doesn't like their original music. Keep those three factors in mind. They gave you the feeling that you felt so good for being with them. Mm-hmm. And when they left, you felt as though something had gone away, you know.
You know, that and a couple bucks will buy a cup of coffee, but a feel-good thing with a group of guys that are trying to make it big in the music business doesn't get you real far. Back then or now, 60 years ago or today.
I thought, well, if they had this effect on me, they're going to have an effect on everybody else.
That's what he thought, huh? So he thought this 4 group of guys who had a lousy name, had a lousy sound, and they had no songs. Those three vital things, keep those in mind. But they made him feel good. Boys, they make me feel good. We better sign them to a recording contract quick. They make me feel good. Now, I'm going to decipher, I'm going to dissect what he's saying here because it makes no sense based off of a recording business, period. Makes no sense. So the industry reality check is this. Record companies are there to do one thing only: make money, lots of money. Labels look for three things. They look for charisma. Beatles had. They look for songs and musicianship. The Beatles had two strikes against them, but they didn't have any musicianship based off of what their producer said when he first met them and heard them, and they had no songs. Without songs, charisma is a gamble for most record companies. They won't even bother with you, right? Because there's no way to make money off of charisma. Even in the 1960s, the music had to be marketable. Now, in 1962, the Beatles auditioned for a huge record company called Decca Records, and they were famously rejected because, I don't remember the gentleman's name, but the owner of Decca, or the big producer there, said guitar groups are on the way out. Okay. We know that because of the British invasion, that was wrong. Their charisma alone did not land them a record deal. Beatles. What did that? You ever wonder if they were lousy musicians and they had a lousy sound and a stupid, corny name, how did they get past this guy, George Martin? How did they get anywhere? If you've heard the Star Club recording, which is one of the earliest recordings of them playing live, they're terrible. They're no better than any other band that stepped foot on that stage. They may have been worse than some of the other bands that played in Hamburg or Germany. Allegedly, this man, Mr. Martin, at EMI Parlophone label, heard their songs, saw their potential. But it's not when he heard their songs, it's when they walked into his office and they were cheeky with him, and he loved that charisma. And this is where I don't understand. There's a big gap in the history books and in this interview, and I've heard other interviews with him where he says the exact same thing. I didn't like them at first. I wanted nothing to do with him. It's on record that he said that. Capitol initially passed on releasing the Beatles in America. This is one of the biggest labels, if not the biggest label in America at the time. So EMI was going to pass on, which was the biggest label in England. Capitol was passing on them. George Martin didn't like their name. George Martin didn't like their sound. George Martin didn't like their songs. He just liked their charisma. Keep in mind that the record business is designed specifically to make money, and you have to have three things. You have to have songs, charisma, and marketability. Without songs, charisma is a gamble. I'm sorry. You need songs, charisma, and musicianship. And let me go into some major industry figures to give you an idea that I'm not just talking right out of my ass. Maria Egan Cohen, Columbia Records A&R rep, says, when we have a great concept, it usually comes from the artist. It's always going to be artist-driven. You need a vision. So, if you know anything about the Beatles, they were just schlepping around Hamburg and Liverpool and London, maybe not London, but Liverpool and Germany, just wearing leather pants, black leather coats. They were playing like 99% cover tunes, Little Richard, Elvis, Larry Williams, all these other bands, and they were just kind of not very good. They had a following. They had some following in England. They had a small following. But they didn't really have a vision. They didn't have any idea who they wanted to be. They just wanted to be famous. They just wanted to go to the toppermost, right? Daniel Warner, Epic Records A&R rep, he says, songs, charisma, and great lead singer are still important, but because of the downturn, we have to be advanced marketers.
You have to think what our marketing department will think, what they'll think of when listening to this music, and whether they'll be able to target it to a certain audience. Now, he's not speaking about the Beatles. He's just speaking in general. This is what they've got to do. They've got to think about the product that's presented to them, and can they sell it? Is there a mass audience that will buy this? Every company does this. It doesn't matter whether it's Apple, Apple Electronics, Apple Computers, or it's, Chevy, or if it's Frito-Lay. They got to figure out, is this a marketable product that's going to make us money? Because the big wigs at the top, they want to see money. Elliot Mazer, producer for Neil Young and Janis Joplin. I'm quoting these people. Elliot says, all of the artists I've thought have a chance, have a clear view of who they are and as people. They're winners. The lead singer is a loser. I don't care how good the songs are. If they're not winners, there's no point in working with them. Now, I don't know what it was like to be a Beatles fan in 1960 to 62 before they got famous. I don't know what it was like to stand in the Cavern or in the Star Club and hear them. But from what I hear of them back then and those old recordings before they were famous, they were not very good. John Lennon screaming into the microphone. Paul McCartney doing a bad impersonation of Elvis because he was heavily influenced by Elvis. Ringo wasn't even in a scene yet. Pete couldn't keep a tempo to save his life. Pete Best, that is their original drummer. They had two bass players on stage. Well, they had one. They had Stu Sutcliffe, who couldn't play the bass. He couldn't play. He could play enough to fake his way through a song, but he would play with his back to the stage. So people couldn't tell he wasn't playing, and I think Paul might have been covering for him at the time. He was just on stage to get girls. The story is very strange if you think about it. From all you guys out there, all the men and women I know across the country that I've met that have been in bands and worked their freaking asses off to get to the level the Beatles got to, this story doesn't make any sense. So Alan Kovac, founder of 10th Street Entertainment, he's quoted as saying, any artist can run their own career. Really, it's about great music. Okay, and again, from the horse's mouth, Mr. Sir George Martin, he is on record as saying he didn't like their sound, they had no good songs, and their name was terrible. Right? To give you some context of who 10th Street Entertainment is, 10th Street Entertainment is a powerhouse artist management company founded by Alan Kovac. They've managed and developed artists like Motley Crue, Five Finger Death Punch, Blondie, Papa Roach, and Duran Duran. Kovac isn't just a manager, he's a strategist, built a reputation for turning artists into global brands. When he says it's all about the music that's coming from someone who's overseen platinum-selling acts for decades, this is the guy you turn to. Now, he's more current than the 1960s. Now, don't get me wrong, there were some bands, as I'd said before, that were signed based off of charisma. Spice Girls, Britney Spears, One Direction, The Monkees. They were all manufactured bands. That sounds kind of interesting. So in walks these four lads from Liverpool who have no songs, don't have a decent sound, but they have charisma. There's a lot of contradictions in the Beatles story. So right here on camera, Mr. Martin is said on camera, I didn't like the name of the band, I didn't like their sound, and they had no songs. 3 strikes against, but they had charisma. So the Beatles had charisma, cheeky humor, mop-top charm, before they were even mop-tops, witty interviews, okay? Even back then, they were supposedly charming the socks off of George Martin. I don't know what that means. I don't know if it means they could suck golf balls through garden hoses, or what. I don't know. Maybe George Martin swung that way. And he had to do them, each of them had to do him a few favors. And Pete said, no, I'm not doing you any favors. I'm out. Not sucking a golf ball through a garden hose for you. Casting couch is what I'm implying. Now, George is later on saying, or during the course of the Beatles' fame, George Martin was saying, without Lennon and McCartney's songwriting, he wouldn't have signed them. Which makes absolutely no sense because they had no songs. They had no good songs. They presented him what Love Me Do, And I can't remember all the couple of songs they gave him, but they weren't that good. Love Me Do. Have you ever heard Love Me Do? It stinks. One chorus, one verse, over and over on a harmonica. Well, I like that one, boys. Without hit songs, he says, like She Loves You and I Want to Hold Your Hand, Capitol wouldn't have budged. Now, I don't know if that's a quote from Mr. Martin, but Capitol heard those songs and I guess they wanted to sign them. That's interesting, isn't it? Conclusion, charisma helped, but songs sealed the deal. Really? Okay. So again, keep in mind, in this interview, years after the Beatles had broken up, this is probably the 1990s, because Roseanne Barr wasn't even a thing until the 80s, I don't think. I don't think she was a real big name. And I doubt if Roseanne will see this, but I like Roseanne much better now than I did back then, because she's awakened to all the lies. So there's a lot of contradictions in the original and the official story of the Beatles, but what do you think? Did the Beatles make it on their charisma alone or because of their songs? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I don't know what to think, really. I'd hate to think that the band that I worshipped for all those years is anything but what they were sold to be, but there's a lot of gaps in the story that make no sense whatsoever. Especially a business that's, all businesses are designed to make money, but the record industry especially is designed to turn people into products. Musicians lose their identity. They get shaped and molded into a product that the record company can sell. And more often than not, they're provided songwriters that write their music for them. I don't think Elvis ever wrote one song. Maybe he wrote a couple, but he released hundreds and hundreds of songs, but they were all cover tunes. Or, they were written specifically for him. And I think he had a look and a sound all of his own before he got famous. I mean, look at the guy. He's just dripping with just quiet charisma, and he's good looking, and he had all these things that really stood out. So what do you think? I don't know what the real story is, but if you look at it, if you can step outside your fanaticism of the Beatles and go, hey, wait, this story doesn't make any sense. You have the ability to do that. And attempt it. I know I used to be engulfed in Beatlemania. I was just engulfed in it. If anybody told me this when I was a kid, I'd been like, buddy, you're freaking crazy. You don't know what you're saying. How dare you put down my idols? Oh my God. How dare you? He's my band. No, and now I'm like, oh, that kind of makes sense. Kind of makes sense. How did these guys get so famous that the guy that ended up signing them didn't like their look, didn't like their sound, and they had no songs, and their name sucked. Charisma? What kind of charisma was it there, George, Mr. George? Were these swingers? Were Brian and George swingers? And they all had a big orgy and said, hey, boys, if you join me in the back room on the couch, I'll be able to work something out. I'm not saying that happened. I'm just joking around. But what was it? I don't know. Maybe Mr. Martin had a leather fetish. Some of us do. All right, guys, let me know what you think. Leave a comment. And again, be polite about the comments. If you say anything belligerent or out of the ordinary, I'm going to block you. I'll block your ass, buddy. And I will not respond. So you're going to try to egg me on and get into an argument. Number one, you would lose if I did. And number two, I'm not even going to bother with you. All right, have a good day.
My soul is torn and tattered, my ego bruised, and I think I understand you now. Yes, I understand you now. Well, I know I thought it strange when you told me that one day your dreams would change, that you were a sucker for the strong, silent type.
Would you like fries with that? Would you like fries with that?